Hi, everyone. Gemar Chatima Tova. I've missed some of you. It's good to see you. There's a story in the Talmud about Choni, the circle drawer. This was 2,000 years ago, sometime in the 1st century BCE. And there was a drought in Jerusalem. And remember that most people were farmers and shepherds back then, and everyone was really distraught. Word had it that Choni knew how to get through to God. So a gang of people came to Choni and begged him, "Help us pray for rain." And whatever, so he prayed for rain, and nothing happened. And then he drew a circle on the ground, and he stood in it, and he looked up to God and said, "Listen, God, these are your people. I'm part of these people, and I'm talking to you now. I didn't ask for some little droplets or anything like that. I want rain. And I'm not going to move from this circle until you give me some rain." So droplets started trickling down from the sky. "Look, God, this isn't enough. I want cisterns to be filled. I want ditches and caves overflowing. I need rain, God." Psh! Rain started pouring down from the sky. There was so much rain that people had to run to the highest part of Jerusalem, the Temple Mount. And they got to the Temple Mount, and there was Choni, probably very pleased with himself. And they ran up to him and they said, Choni, this is too much rain. We don't want all this rain. Tell God to stop the rain." But this time, actually, Choni didn't turn to God. Choni looked at the gang of people and said, "You see that stone there called the Even HaTo'in, the claimant stone? Go there and see if it's washed away." That's the end of the story. What? How come every time when I was a kid, I heard this story, they left out that last part? I think the rabbis didn't know what the heck the Even HaTo'in was. So, I like studying. I looked it up. What's this Even HaTo'in? The claimant stone, or the stone for the lost. It was actually a place in Jerusalem at the highest level on the Temple Mount. And people would go there and they would say, "Listen, hello, I've lost something." And then other people who found something would go to that same stone and say, "Oh, I found something." And you had to show simanim, you had to show signs to say, "Oh yeah, this is definitely my diamond ring," or "This is the book that I lost," right? You had to show signs, but that's what the Even HaTo'in was. And I wish we had an Even To'in right now. I wish we had a stone for the lost, because we've lost so much in the past couple of years. And I'm not talking about the inconvenience of misplacing one's cell phone or keys, though I do that often. I'm talking major losses. The loss of civil rights, personal safety, financial security. The loss of foundational American values like respect for dissent and difference. The loss of counting on our institutions to protect our democracy. The loss of being able to assess who's speaking the truth and who's making up stuff. We've all lost so much of what we thought we could count on as Americans, and we're reeling. This is an existential moment. We might not have an Even HaTo'in a stone for the lost to gather around where we can find our big losses of today. But we do have two things. We have our sanctuary, literally a place of refuge where we can come together to mourn, to breathe, to hold one another. And we have our sacred texts, which can nourish and guide us, guide our lost souls. But first, since we've lost so much, I actually want to look at the verb to lose, because it has a real interesting history to it. Originally, to lose came from the Old English word meaning to perish, which came from an older word meaning to separate or cut apart. Many of us feel cut apart after the past 2 years of wars and arson and murder. We feel separate from one another because we've lost friendships, because we disagree, for example, over vaccinations or the Israel-Gaza war, or what our own leaders are doing in the US government. And then in the 14th century, to lose came to mean failing to win, which also feels apt today. Because no matter what side of the aisle you're on, red or blue or purple in between, we're all failing to win right now. No one wins when people aren't provided adequate safety and healthcare and education. And even if you have all of those privileges, someone doesn't. And that, frankly, means it's not a win for all of us. It's a loss. And finally, in the 16th century, there became the added idea of losing our mind. And this also feels right now, because anyone who hasn't felt like you're losing your mind this past couple of years is either asleep or in denial. And of course, there are also personal losses that happen every year. Some of us have suffered the loss of a dear one, or a relationship, or our innocence. We might have suffered the loss of what we thought our family might look like, or the dream that we had for our children or grandchildren. And some of these losses, frankly, are irreversible. And some of them aren't. And even though there can be some positive aspects to losing, like losing ourselves in a conversation or in a book, or the joy of losing our self-consciousness, most losses are difficult. And we feel vulnerable, fragile, unmoored, and sometimes even angry. Angry at ourselves, the injustice in the world, or God. And what's so frustrating about loss is that we're reminded that we're not in control. And we hate that. I hate that. Because loss teaches us how enormous and complex and mysterious our world is, and how there's really nothing too large to be lost, and no place too small for something to get lost, and ultimately, how small we really are. And it's not just as Americans that we've lost. We've also lost as a Jewish collective. First, we've lost the narrative that we used to tell ourselves, that we don't behave like other people. We're rachamim b'nei rachamim. We're compassionate children born of compassionate parents. And yes, there are necessary wars. That's true. But any war is devastating. And in the end, we act like everyone else. We lie, we abuse, we cause havoc, like all other people. Granted, we don't do that unprovoked. But once we're threatened, We react from a place of trauma and we lash out. Second, we've lost our unity. Of course, as Jews, we always argue with one another. That's a strength. Being able to disagree has made us deeper, brilliant people and ones who see the nuance in everything. But when stuff hits the fan, we always stuck together. No more. Now people are leaving shuls because they don't want to daven next to someone who's a Zionist or not Zionist enough. Some Jews are turning their backs on Judaism as a whole because they're embarrassed to be associated with us. And some Jews are accusing fellow members of the tribe of being anti-Semitic. It's awful. And third, we've lost our most sacred value, that all people are created holy and in God's image. No more. Now we're counting numbers of dead people or violated people on one side or the other as if that matters. We're allowing people who are dark-skinned to be swept up by ICE, people who are LGBTQ to be denied health care and legal rights that they deserve. And when we drive down the street like I did this morning, we turn our backs on unhoused people who are relieving themselves in the street. It doesn't make sense. We're losing who we are as Americans and as Jews. And I'm embarrassed. And I imagine many of you are too. I believe our deep textual wisdom can guide us at this disturbing and frightening time. The Torah actually has a deep discussion about issues of lost and found. It's mainly in Exodus and Deuteronomy. And the scenario is that if you find someone's sheep or ox, the Torah says don't ignore it. You must take it back to that person. And not just a person's animal, but anything that a person loses. And even if your enemy loses something, Torah says you have to return it to them. And then that section ends with this amazing teaching. You must not remain indifferent. And the Hebrew word for indifferent is so good. It's lehit alem, which means don't hide, don't conceal yourself. In other words, don't pretend not to see what we're losing by averting our eyes and consequently shielding and concealing yourself from who you should be and how you should act. So I'll name it. I feel ashamed that we're sometimes hiding and averting our eyes to the horrors in Israel and Gaza, in Sudan, in Ukraine, to the murders and attempted murders of people that we can't stand and people who we hold dear, and to the constant chipping away at our country's democratic infrastructure and free speech. And so what are we supposed to do? How can we find our way back and not hide? The rabbis actually expand on this part of the Torah about lost and found, and they call it a mitzvah. They call it the mitzvah of hashevat avedah, of returning lost objects to a person. And I will spare you the minutia of this, but believe me, the rabbis have an entire tractate in the Talmud just about lost and found. That's the part of my sermon that I copied and deleted. But suffice it to say, they understood the financial, emotional, psychological distress that a person, any person, Jew or non-Jew, goes through when they lose something and their world collapses. They even discuss whether it's relevant that a person who has lost an object has given up hope for its return. Do you still need to give it back to them? Today, with all of the losses that we're suffering as individuals, as Americans, and as Jews, who can help us find ourselves? Who can remind us of who we are and the values we need to defend? Who's standing on that Even HaTo'in, that stone for the lost, waving our souls in front of us, saying, hey, you lost yourselves. Come back. I'm waiting for you. I'd like to bring Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav in the room. I think he can guide us. He knew a lot about lost and found. Nachman lived in the Ukraine, 1700s. He died when he was only 38 years old. He suffered the death of 5 out of 8 of his children and his wife, all before he died at 38. He suffered with severe depression and perhaps bipolar disorder. Meanwhile, as a rabbi, he was deeply spiritual and able to hold his community through the Napoleonic War and the Cossack peasant rebellion. So he didn't have an easy life. What did he teach about lost and found? He taught that when we lose something dear to us, the loss of a person who we once loved, the loss of a belief in God or humanity, or a sustaining philosophy that held us and is now lost to us, or even the words of our prayer book that once meant something to us and now, we've lost meaning and significance to those words. In those moments, who is the finder of such life losses? For Nachman, it's Ribono Shel Olam. It's the master, the creator of the universe. The Holy One is the finder of such losses. The divine will hold on to it and hold on to us until we're ready to reclaim our losses. We may need time to work through a relationship, a theological challenge, a world crisis of which we have many. But God's time is infinite, says Nachman, as long as we hold on to the desire to return, to the ground we stand on, that place of the stone of the lost, the Even HaTo'in. Then our Creator will hold on to us until we're ready to reclaim what we've left behind. Losing hope, not an option for Nachman, and it can't be for us. Maybe our hearts are too broken right now. Maybe our stomachs are literally too upset. Maybe we're not ready to find what was lost. And you know what? It's okay. As long as we remember that what's lost to us is only temporary and not lost to its own existence. My teacher, Reb Mimi Fagelson, she drashes on Reb Nachman, and she suggests that in addition to God, maybe we, each one of us, can be the spiritual finder for one another. Maybe we can hold on to each other's greatness and potential and gifts and strengths when each of us is lost. And we can promise to return those gifts back to one another when we're ready to reclaim them. Actually, Rabbi Akiva did this for his friends. Another story. It was the 1st century. The temple had been totally destroyed. Akiva and his 3 friends climbed the Temple Mount, walked through the ruins of the destroyed temple, and ripped their clothing as a sign of mourning. And then they approached the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies, the center of the temple, the innermost part, where on Yom Kippur Day, the Kohen HaGadol, the high priest, would go in and ask for forgiveness for all of Israel. And as they arrived at this most sacred place on earth, a fox emerged from the rubble. And everyone started to weep. An unkosher fox emerging from the holiest place on earth. But Akiva, he started laughing. Why are you laughing? Why shouldn't I laugh? Akiva said. Don't you remember that there was a prophet who once prophesied that Jerusalem would be in rubble and a forest would grow around Jerusalem and foxes would roam there? There's the fox. It's happening. And then a later prophet, Akiva said, reminded his friends, after that first devastation, another prophet prophesied that one day there would be children who would play in the streets of Jerusalem and old people would dance and rejoice. I'm laughing, said Akiva, because we're done with the first prophecy. And now we're ready for the second prophecy. The holy city will be rebuilt. Imagine Akiva's jarring laugh. They're standing in ruins, yet he knows that what was lost will be found. Perhaps he's even standing literally on that Even HaTo'in, that stone for the lost. I have to believe that Akiva knew there would be better days. And Nachman knew and believed that God's steadfast ability to hold us always when our lives feel lost, that they both knew that things will get better. And I'm saying things will get better. There's a Hasidic master who teaches that every day we lose part of ourselves. We lose part of our souls. And that life is constantly about finding and losing and finding ourselves. And that every day a voice from Mount Sinai cries out to each of us, remember to search for what you've lost. Every day. Today, on the holiest day of the year, let's listen. God's screaming at all of us, for all of us. Find yourself. Imagine if we became like Choni, if we drew a circle on the ground and one big circle, and we invited everyone in that circle, people that we can't stand, that we fully disagree with, people who bother us, people who we love, people who we want to hold close. Imagine if we drew a circle and invited everyone in that circle, and we looked up to God and we said, I'm not moving from here, God. We need you. Stop hiding from us. Stop hiding, God, and we'll stop hiding from you. May it be so.